The mining colony on Virgo 7 had existed peacefully for 12 standard cycles without incident, and the 300 workers who called it home had grown comfortable in their routine. The Vrix colonists were insectoid beings who stood no taller than a human child, and their chitinous bodies glimmered with an opalescent sheen under the colony's artificial lights, and they worked the mineral-rich asteroids in the system with practiced efficiency. The Talon overseers were aquatic creatures who managed operations from their fluid-filled habitats, and their tentacle forms moved with grace through the pressurized water that sustained them. And they had chosen this remote location specifically because of its distance from the more aggressive species that prowled the galaxy's trade routes when the alarms began screaming through every corridor and habitat module. The colonists initially thought it was a drill, or perhaps a malfunction in the early warning system. Skittering through shadows was a junior Vrix supervisor, and his compound eyes caught the sensor readings before most others did, and what he saw made his antennae flatten against his carapace. In pure Terror 7 ships had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, and their energy signatures matched nothing in the peaceful colony's databases, and they were big and heavily armed and moving inward with clear, hostile intent. The lead Talon administrator, Wave Upon Shore, immediately activated the emergency protocols and sent out the distress beacon on all Galactic Council frequencies, and her voice remained calm even as her tentacles betrayed her fear with their rapid color shifts. From blue to deep purple, the distress call was simple and direct, and it contained the colony's coordinates and the nature of the threat, and a desperate plea for any Council forces in range to respond with military aid. What the colonists did not know was that the nearest Council patrol fleet was 3 full days away at maximum faster-than-light speeds, and the second nearest was even further out on the opposite edge of the sector. The hostile ships continued their approach, and within 2 hours they had entered orbit around Virgo 7, and the colonists finally got visual confirmation of what they faced. The Krell had found them. Every spacefaring species in the Galactic Council knew of the Krell and feared them in equal measure, and they were apex predators from a world even harsher than most, and they stood 7 feet tall with chitinous black armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Their philosophy was simple and brutal, and they divided all intelligent species into 2 categories: the Krell themselves and prey. The Krell did not negotiate, and did not trade, and did not recognize any authority beyond their own war leaders, and they took what they wanted and killed anyone who resisted, and sometimes killed those who didn't resist just for the sport of it. Wave Upon Shore watched helplessly as the Krell dropships began their descent toward the colony, and she knew that the colonists had perhaps an hour before the first warriors reached their habitats. The 2 Vrix patrol ships that had been mining escort duty tried to mount a defense, and their light weapons scored superficial hits on the Krell vessels before both patrol ships were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated debris. Skittering through shadows helped evacuate the outer modules and guided frightened workers toward the central habitats where they might have a chance of holding out until help arrived. And he tried not to think about how long 3 days was when measured against Krell aggression. The distress beacon continued broadcasting on all Council frequencies and repeating its message over and over into the uncaring void of space. But the beacon had a problem that no one in the colony knew about. The communications relay that handled their sector was old and poorly maintained, and it had been scheduled for replacement twice, but budget constraints kept pushing the upgrade back, and the relay's routing protocols were based on stellar charts that were decades out of date. When the distress call hit the relay, it was automatically forwarded along channels that the modern Galactic Council no longer monitored, and it bounced through junction points that had been abandoned when newer and faster routes were established. The signal propagated outward along these forgotten pathways and spread across frequencies that most species had long since stopped using. 3 days away, the Council Fleet received the properly routed distress call and began making preparations to respond. And they followed all proper protocols and estimated their arrival time and began forming up their ships for the journey. But on the forgotten frequencies, something else was listening. The cargo hauler, Eternal Optimist, was 3 weeks into a routine supply run between human colonies when her communications officer picked up the strange signal, and the message was garbled, and the language was unknown but the universal. Distress harmonics were unmistakable. Captain Maria Rodriguez was a third-generation spacer, and her family had been hauling cargo since Earth first reached beyond its solar system, and she had made her living in the black for 40 years and knew the laws of space as well as she knew her own heartbeat. The first law was simple. You answer distress calls, and you answer all of them, and you don't ask who or why or whether it's convenient. She ordered her navigator to plot a course to the coordinates embedded in the signal, and she sent out a call on whole human frequencies requesting any ships in range to converge on the same location, the Deep Space Research Station Curiosity's Reward, received both the distress call and Captain Rodriguez's message, and the station's director, Dr. James Chen, immediately began organizing his staff. The station had 3 shuttles and 2 small research vessels, and none of them were designed for combat, but Chen had spent 10 years studying weapons, applications of mining technology, and he knew exactly how to turn peaceful equipment into something far more dangerous. The exploration frigate Remember Perth was the 3rd human vessel to pick up the signals, and Captain Sarah Okonkwo read the parsed distress call with growing anger. Ship was small by military standards and designed for long-range reconnaissance rather than fleet actions, but she carried enough firepower to handle pirates and raiders, and her crew was Terran Defense Fleet trained and ready. She immediately changed course and sent her own transmission back toward human space, and it was a simple message that used codes established generations ago. The codes meant civilians in danger and hostile, force present, and all available ships respond on Earth and Mars and Titan and Europa and across 100 human colonies and stations. The message propagated through the network's merchant captains altered their courses, and colony defense forces scrambled their ready ships, and even civilian pleasure craft began plotting jumps toward the coordinates, and Earth's 3rd Fleet, which had been conducting exercises near the Proxima Centauri system, received the alert, and Admiral Sarah Chun read the decoded message and made her decision in seconds. The 3rd Fleet was humanity's rapid response force, and it consisted of 23 capital ships and 47 support vessels, and it could reach the coordinates in approximately 8 hours at maximum. Faster than light speed. Admiral Chun gave the order, and the entire fleet changed course as one back on Virgo 7. The first Krell warriors had breached the outer habitats and, skittering through shadows, watched on security feeds as the predators moved through corridors with terrifying efficiency. Wave upon shore had sealed herself and 30 other colonists in the Central Command habitat, and she continued broadcasting the distress call even though she knew that help would not arrive in time. The Krell war leader stood nearly 8 feet tall, and his name translated roughly as He Who Devours Resistance, and he had led 17 successful raids against what the Krell considered prey species. He broadcast his own message toward the sealed habitat and offered the colonists a choice: emerge and be killed quickly, or hide and be killed slowly. After his warriors cut through the doors, Wave upon shore did not respond and simply kept broadcasting her distress call into the void. The Krell began setting up plasma cutters to breach the command habitat's reinforced doors, and He Who Devours Resistance estimated they would break through in approximately 30 minutes at the edge of the Virgo system. 3 human ships dropped out of faster than light travel almost simultaneously. The Eternal Optimist was a cargo hauler that massed 8,000 tons and carried containers of manufacturing supplies and agricultural equipment. The Remember Perth was a sleek military vessel that bristled with weapons arrays and sensor equipment, and surrounding them came a swarm of smaller craft from Curiosity's reward and research shuttles and mining vessels, and even a small passenger yacht whose owner had heard the call and could not ignore it. Captain Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies in badly pronounced Galactic Standard that she had learned from a cheap translation database. Her message was simple: heard you needed help and we're not military, but we've got arms and we're mad enough to use them. The Crow intercepted the transmission, and he who devours resistance listened to the alien language and the primitive translation, and he felt something that might have been amusement more. Bray had arrived and apparently wanted to die alongside the colonists, and this would make the raid even more profitable. He broadcast his response in Galactic Standard: you are prey, and you will be devoured, and your ships will be claimed. On the bridge of Remember Perth, Captain Okonkwo smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. She sent one more transom. Skittering through shadows, watched his sensor array with confusion that bordered on disbelief, and the readings made no sense according to everything he knew about faster-than-light travel and response times. The distress call had been sent less than 3 hours ago, and the nearest known military forces were still days away. And yet his sensors were detecting multiple ships arriving at the system's edge. The energy signatures were strange and inefficient by Galactic Council standards, and the drive systems seemed to waste enormous amounts of power, and the ships themselves were bulky and ungainly compared to the sleek vessels of the Council races. But they were here, and they were many, and they were still coming. 24 contacts became 50, and 50 became 100, and skittering through shadows. Had to recalibrate his sensors twice because he thought they were malfunctioning. Wave upon shore received the transmission from the unknown vessel, and the Galactic Standard was indeed badly pronounced and grammatically questionable, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone had heard their distress call, and someone had come to help. She tried to respond and warn these newcomers about the Krell, and explained that this was a military situation beyond civilian capability, and she got as far as identifying herself before the battle began. The cargo hauler Eternal Optimist was not designed for combat, and Captain Rodriguez knew this as well as anyone, and her ship carried point defense systems meant for clearing debris fields and micrometeorite swarms, but those systems did not particularly care what they were shooting at, and the targeting computers could track hundreds of small, fast-moving objects simultaneously. When the Krell sent a squadron of fighters to intercept what they assumed was easy prey, the Eternal Optimist's defense grid lit up like a solar flare. The point defense lasers were designed to vaporize objects no bigger than a fist, and they fired in coordinated bursts of dozens or hundreds of shots per second, and the Krell fighters flew directly into a wall of coherent light. 3 fighters disintegrated immediately, and 2 more tumbled away with catastrophic damage, and the remaining 4 tried to scatter, but the targeting systems had already locked onto their heat signatures. Captain Rodriguez broadcast to all human ships: weapons free and protect the colony, and show these bastards why you don't ignore a distress call. The research vessels from Curiosity's reward were never meant to see combat in. Dr. Chen had spent his career studying stellar phenomena and mineral extraction techniques, but focus mining lasers could cut through solid rock, and experimental particle beam equipment could strip mine asteroids from a distance, and industrial grade sensor arrays could be reconfigured to emit concentrated electromagnetic pulses. The research ship Newton's Pride targeted a Krell destroyer with equipment meant to analyze geological composition and the high-intensity scanning beam hit the destroyer's hull at full power. The Krell armor began to superheat and buckle, and internal systems started to fail as the concentrated energy overwhelmed their thermal management. And within seconds, critical failures cascaded through the ship's power grid. The destroyer tried to maneuver away, but two of Dr. Chun's shuttles had flanked it, and they opened up with mining equipment that liquefied metal, and the Krell ship came apart in a brilliant explosion on Virgil 7. The Krell warriors stopped their assault on the command habitat, and he, who devours resistance, demanded a status report from his fleet. What he heard made his predatory instincts scream warnings, and 3 of his ships were already destroyed or disabled, and more unknown vessels were entering the system, and his remaining ships were reporting that these newcomers fought with tactics that made no sense. Prey species did not ram military vessels with cargo haulers, and they did not weaponize scientific equipment, and they did not suicide charge fighter screens in unarmed shuttles. But these aliens were doing all of that and more. Remember, Perth moved through the battle space like a hunting shark, and Captain Okonkwo had trained for combat operations. Her entire adult life, and her crew executed maneuvers with precision that would have impressed any military observer. Frigate's main railgun spoke once, and a Krell cruiser lost its entire forward section, and the secondary batteries tracked and destroyed every fighter that came within range, and the missile pods launched hunter-killer drones that pursued fleeing targets. Relentlessly, Captain Okonkwo broadcast to the Krellon all frequencies, and her voice was cold and professional. You were given a chance to leave, and you chose to stay, and now you will face the consequences. He who devours resistance felt something unfamiliar creeping into his thoughts, and it took him a moment to identify the emotion as fear. The Krell did not fear prey, and they had raided hundreds of colonies and faced dozens of species, and never encountered resistance like this. These newcomers fought as if they themselves were predators, and they showed no hesitation and no mercy, and they pursued his ships with determination that seemed almost personal. He gave the order to withdraw and take whatever they could salvage and retreat to regroup. The human ships did not allow this. The Eternal Optimist altered course to intercept the Krell troop transports, and her point defense grid tore into the likely armored ships, and Captain Rodriguez broadcast, "You came here to hurt people, and you don't get to just leave." 2 transports exploded, and a third tumbled out of control, and its crew abandoning ship in escape pods. The research vessels systematically hunted down every Krell fighter that had participated in the attack, and Dr. Chun had downloaded the security footage from the colony and seen what the Krell had done to the outer habitats. He felt no remorse as his ships improvised weapons reduced fighter after fighter to expanding debris clouds. The Remember Perth pursued he who devours resistance's flagship into the outer system, and Captain Okonkwo's crew tracked the Krell vessel through 3 faster-than-light jumps and finally cornered it near a gas giant's gravity well. The Krell war leader broadcast his surrender and offered tribute and promised to leave this sector and never return. Captain Okonkwo's response was simple. You called them prey, and you came here to kill and take, and now you face humans, and we don't forget and we don't forgive. The Remember Perth's railgun fired, and he who devours resistance's flagship came apart, and the escape pods that launched were tracked and disabled but not destroyed. The human captain would allow the Krell survivors to live, but only so they could carry a message back to their people. Skittering through shadows had been broadcasting continuously and trying to tell these unknown warriors that the colony was safe and the immediate threat was neutralized, and they could stand down. The humans acknowledged his transmissions with brief confirmations and then continued hunting Krell ships across the entire system. It took 4 more hours before the last Krell vessel either fled beyond scanner range or was destroyed or disabled. Only then did the human ships begin responding to proper communications. Captain Rodriguez's face appeared on Wave Upon Shore's display, and the human woman looked tired but satisfied, and her brown skin was sheened with sweat, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical tail. She spoke in heavily accented Galactic Standard. Sorry for the delay, and we wanted to make sure all the hostiles were dealt with, and is everyone in the colony, okay? Wave Upon Shore's translator struggled with the human's casual tone, and the talent administrator finally managed to respond. You saved US, and we are grateful beyond measure. And may I ask who you are and what species you represent? Captain Rodriguez smiled, and it transformed her tired face into something warm. We're human and we're from Earth, and well, a lot of places now, and we heard your distress call, and we came skittering through shadows. Interrupted with the question that had been burning in his mind. How did you arrive so quickly, and the nearest military forces are days away, and you came in hours? The human Captain looked confused by the question. Your distress call came through on frequencies we monitor, and we were close enough to help, and so we came, and it's what anyone would do. Wave Upon Shore tried to explain that this level of response was unprecedented, and that over 300 ships now held position in the system, and that mobilizing such a force for strangers was unheard of, and Council Space Captain Rodriguez's expression shifted to something between confusion and concern. Strangers? You send a distress call, and that makes you people who need help, and we don't let people die when we can save them. Before the conversation could continue, skittering through shadows, his sensors lit up with new contacts, and his translator actually produced a sound that might have been a whimper. The signatures were massive, and they registered as military-grade vessels, and there were dozens of them. 23 capital ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, and they massed more than the entire Krell raiding fleet combined, and their weapons arrays made the Remember Perth look like a small patrol boat support. Vessels followed and created a defensive perimeter, and the whole formation moved with precision. That spoke of serious military training. Captain Rodriguez looked at her own sensors and actually laughed. Well, that's the third fleet, and looks like Admiral Chun made good time. Wave Upon Shore felt her tentacles go completely pale. That is a time. Wave Upon Shore felt her tentacles go upon shore. Felt her tentacles go completely pale. Fleet? An entire military fleet responded to our distress call? The medical teams from Admiral Chun's fleet arrived at Virgo 7 within the hour, and they moved with practiced efficiency through the damaged colony modules. Dr. Amanda Assay led the primary medical response, and she had served in disaster zones across human space for 15 years, and she had seen everything from mining accidents to hull breaches to radiation exposure. But she had never treated an alien patient before. The Rick's worker in front of her had been injured when the Krell breached. The outer habitat in his chitinous shell was cracked and leaking. Clear fluid in his breathing spiracles fluttered weakly. Dr. Assay's medical scanner gave her readings that made partial sense, and the biology was different, but not incomprehensibly so, and she could see patterns in the data that suggested how to proceed. She looked at her assistant. The shell is like bone structure, and the fluid is probably analogous to blood, and we need to seal the cracks and prevent further fluid loss. Her assistant prepared a polymer sealant that was designed for emergency hull repairs, and Dr. Assay tested it on a small section of the injured. Rick's shell and the material bonded without causing apparent distress. She worked quickly and sealed each crack and monitored her scanner for signs of adverse reaction, and within 20 minutes the Rick's breathing had stabilized. The worker's translator finally engaged. You saved my life, and I do not even know what you are. Dr. Assay smiled behind her mask. I'm human, and I'm a doctor, and saving lives is what I do. Across the colony, similar scenes played out, and human engineers worked alongside Rick's technicians to repair damaged habitats and restore power to offline modules. Chief Engineer Marcus Johnson stood in front of a Talon water filtration system and scratched his head, and the design was elegant but completely unfamiliar. A young Talon technician named Ripple of Morning approached hesitantly. Can you repair it? Our people cannot survive long without properly filtered water. Marcus studied the system and traced the flow patterns and recognized the underlying principles even if the implementation was alien. It's basically just a multi-stage purification system. And yeah, I can fix this and might take me a bit to figure out your connection standards, but the physics is the same. He pulled tools from his kit and began working, and he talked while he worked because that was how Marcus always operated. So you folks are aquatic, right? That must be interesting. And I worked on submarine habitats back on Europa, and that's one of Jupiter's moons, and it's got an ocean under the ice. Ripple of Morning watched the human work and listened to his casual chatter and slowly began to relax. You have underwater cities on your world? Marcus laughed. We have cities everywhere, and underwater and underground and in space and on planets. That'll kill you 6 different ways if your suit fails, and humans are stubborn that way. The filtration system hummed back to life, and Marcus ran diagnostics and nodded in satisfaction. There you go, and good as new, and probably better actually because I upgraded your flow regulators. Admiral Chun walked through the colony with Wave upon shore and observed the recovery efforts and noted how her people interacted with the aliens. She saw a human marine sharing ration bars with a group of Rick's children, and the kids were chattering excitedly about the battle. And the Marine was carefully editing out the more graphic details. She watched a human pilot helping a Talon elder navigate through a damaged corridor and offering support when the elder's mobility device malfunctioned, and she listened to her crew singing work songs as they hauled debris and repaired structures, and the music echoed through the colony in 12 different human language. Wave upon shore spoke quietly. I do not understand your people, and you fight like demons, but you care for us like we are your own. Admiral Chun considered her response carefully. We're human, and that means we know how to fight when we have to, but we'd rather build and heal and help. And we do both because sometimes the galaxy requires both. The Talon administrator's tentacles rippled in confusion. But why come at all? We are strangers to you, and you owe us nothing, and yet you sent an entire fleet. The Admiral stopped walking and turned to face Wave upon shore directly. You sent a distress call, and that means you needed help, and we have a doctrine and a promise that we made to ourselves, and any call, and every time. She gestured to the busy colony around them. Every human out here knows that if they call for help, someone will come, and it doesn't matter if you're on a corporate hauler or a military ship or a science station, and if you call, we answer. Wave upon shore absorbed this. That is a remarkable philosophy, Admiral Chun smiled. It's a survival mechanism. And we come from a world that tried to kill us, and so we learned to help each other, and we took that lesson with us when we left Earth. A lieutenant approached and saluted. Admiral, and we've established a defensive perimeter, and sensor buoys are active and will detect any hostile ships long before they reach the colony. The Admiral nodded. Good, and maintain combat patrols, and the Krull know where this colony is now, and they might come back. Wave upon shore's tentacles went pale. You're staying? But surely you have other duties and other places you must be. Admiral Chun's expression hardened. The Council forces won't arrive for another 2 days, and until they do, we hold the line. And we don't leave people undefended. She paused and then added, also, we listened to what the Krull were broadcasting during the battle, and they called your people prey, and we've been called that before in our history, and we didn't like it and we don't tolerate it. The next 2 days established patterns that would define human-alien relations for years to come. Humans worked tirelessly to repair the colony, and they asked for nothing in return and refused offers of payment and seemed genuinely confused when Wave upon shore tried to discuss compensation. Captain Rodriguez explained it to skittering through shadows. You needed help, and we helped, and that's how it works. And when we need help someday, maybe you'll remember this and help us. The civilian crews integrated seamlessly with the military forces, and Dr. Chun's research teams collaborated with Admiral Chun's engineers, and the distinction between military and civilian seemed almost irrelevant to the humans. What mattered was the work and getting the colony functional again. The Vrix and Talon colonists began to understand that humans came in remarkable variety, and they saw people with skin tones ranging from pale cream to deep brown, and features that suggested dozens of different ancestral origins. They heard languages that sounded nothing like each other and saw cultural practices that varied wildly between different human groups, but they all agreed on the fundamental principle: you help when someone needs it. On the second day, a Krell scouting ship appeared at the edge of the system and immediately turned to flee when it detected the human fleet. The Remember Perth was closest, and Captain Okonkwo requested permission to pursue. Admiral Chun denied the request. Let them go, and let them report what they found here, and let them tell their people that this colony is protected. The scout ship jumped to faster than light and disappeared. Wave upon shore asked Admiral Chun about the decision. Why not destroy it? The Krell will only use the information to plan another attack. The Admiral shook her head. The Krell need to learn that attacking colonies has consequences, and that some prey can bite back, and let them wonder how many human fleets are out here, and let them worry about which colonies are protected. She looked at the Talon administrator. Fear can be a deterrent, and we'd rather they fear attacking than have to fight them again. When the Council fleet finally arrived, it was led by a Vrix admiral named Cuts Through Space, and he commanded 12 warships and 4 support vessels. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and detected the human presence, and he immediately went to high alert status. Admiral Chun hailed the Council fleet. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet, and welcome to Virgil 7, and the colony is secure, and we're transferring defense responsibilities to you. Cuts Through Space studied his sensors. You are the unknown force that responded to the distress call? Our analysts thought the reports were exaggerated. Admiral Chun allowed herself a small smile. The reports were probably accurate, and we take distress calls seriously. The Council Admiral requested permission to send observers to the colony, and Admiral Chun granted it immediately. The observers spent 6 hours interviewing colonists and reviewing battle footage and inspecting the repairs and documenting everything they saw. When they reported back to Cuts Through Space, their summary was simple. The humans had saved the colony and had fought with remarkable effectiveness, and had provided humanitarian aid without any demands or conditions. And they had done it all in response to a distress call from complete strangers. Cuts Through Space contacted Admiral Chun for a private channel. I must report this to the Galactic Council, and they will have questions, and many questions. Admiral Chun nodded. I understand, and we're ready to answer questions, and we're ready to talk. She paused. But we're also ready to respond to more distress calls, and that won't change regardless of what your council decides. The human fleet began preparations to depart, and the colonists gathered to watch them leave. Wave upon shore made a speech thanking the humans and promising that Virgil 7 would never forget what they had done. Admiral Chun responded simply, take care of each other and rebuild your home. And if the Galactic Council chambers had stood for 3,000 standard cycles, and they had hosted debates between hundreds of species and witnessed the resolution of countless conflicts, but they had never been quite this crowded. Representatives from 200 member species packed the observation galleries, and the floor was filled with delegates and analysts and military advisors. The central display showed footage from Virgil 7, and the images played on repeat for all to see. A human cargo hauler ramming a Krell destroyer, and the impact creating an explosion that lit up the visual spectrum. A research vessel disabling a warship with equipment meant for mining asteroids. The Remember Perth hunting down fleeing Krell fighters with relentless precision, and then the aftermath showing human medical teams treating wounded aliens and engineers, repairing damaged habitats, and marines singing while they cleared to breathe. Council Chairman was a being Khalid Harmonious Accord and his species. communicated through bioluminescent patterns and subsonic vibrations, and he had led the council for 40 cycles. He called the session to order. "We are here to discuss first contact with a species calling themselves human, and they have demonstrated both remarkable military capability and unexpected humanitarian concern." A Vrix delegate stood, and her name was Seas Far Ahead. "They saved one of our colonies, and they asked for nothing in return. And my people are grateful beyond measure." A Talon representative added his voice. "They fought the Krull, and won decisively, and the Krull have terrorized the outer colonies for generations, and perhaps these humans could help us address this threat." But not everyone was convinced. A delegate from the consortium of peaceful species stood, and his species were herbivorous herd animals who had never known violence until they reached space. "They are clearly warriors from a dangerous world, and look at how they fight, and they use civilian ships as weapons, and they pursue defeated enemies without mercy." Another voice joined in, and this from a species who had suffered through multiple wars. "They display all the characteristics of an aggressive predator species, and what happens when they decide we are prey?" Skittering through shadows had been invited to provide testimony, and he stood before the council feeling very small. "I was there, and I watched them fight, and yes, they are terrifying in battle." He paused, and his translator carried his next words clearly. "But I also watched them care for our wounded, and I heard them singing while they worked, and I saw their Admiral asked permission to help us rather than simply taking control." Seas Far Ahead added, "They could have claimed the colony, and we were helpless, and they had overwhelming force, and instead they repaired what was damaged and left when council forces arrived." A military analyst from one of the council's defensive fleets presented tactical data. "Their combat doctrine is highly effective, but also concerning, and they appear willing to sacrifice individual ships and even individual lives to achieve objectives." He brought up footage of a human shuttle deliberately ramming a Krull fighter. "This is not normal military behavior, and most species value preservation of their own forces." Harmonious Accord dimmed his bioluminescence thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should hear from the humans themselves, and I understand they have sent a diplomatic transmission." The central display changed and showed a transmission recorded 3 days. Earlier, Admiral Sarah Chun appeared, and she wore a formal uniform and sat in what was clearly her ship's ready room. Behind her stood several other humans, and they represented a variety of ages and ethnicities and roles. The Admiral began speaking. "To the Galactic Council, I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet, and I speak on behalf of humanity." Her voice was calm and professional. "We are aware that our intervention at Virgil 7 has raised questions and concerns, and we welcome dialogue and discussion." She gestured to the people behind her. "We are a diverse species from a world we call Earth, and our planet tested us in ways that shaped who we are, and everything on Earth evolved in competition and in cooperation, and we learned both lessons well." One of the other humans stepped forward, and he wore civilian clothes. "I am Dr. James Chun, and I led the research vessels at Virgil 7. And I am a scientist, not a soldier, and yet I participated in combat because people needed help." He continued, "This is normal for humans, and we all contribute. When there is crisis, and military and civilian and researcher and merchant, and we all respond." Captain Rodriguez appeared next. "I am Maria Rodriguez, and I captain a cargo hauler, and I have 3 children back home, and I risk my ship and my life for strangers, because that is what humans do." She smiled. "My grandmother told me that space is dangerous and lonely and cold, and the only thing that keeps us alive is knowing someone will come if we call, and so we answer when others call." Admiral Chun resumed speaking. "We know that our military capabilities concern you, and they should, and we are dangerous when we need to be." Her expression hardened. "We come from a world that tried to kill us in every possible way, and predators and disease and weather and geology, and we survived by being smart and tough and willing to fight." She paused. But we also survived by helping each other and by building communities and by refusing to abandon our people. And we fought each other for thousands of years and learned the terrible cost of war. Another human appeared, and she wore academic robes. I am Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, and I study human history, and we have made terrible mistakes, and we have committed atrocities, and we have nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. She met the camera directly. We know what we are capable of, and both the good and the bad, and we choose to be better, and we choose to help rather than harm when we can. Admiral Chun returned to the center of the transmission. We do not ask for membership in your council, and we do not demand territory or trade agreements, and we ask only one thing. She leaned forward. If someone calls for help, let us answer, and it is who we are, and it is what we do. The transmission showed a montage of images from human history and cities on Earth and Mars and Europa and Titan and colonies scattered across dozens of systems. It showed humans of every variation working together and building and exploring and helping each other. Admiral Chun's voice continued. We reached for the stars alone, and we had no one to guide us and no one to help us, and we learned to rely on each other. The montage shifted to show rescue operations and disaster response teams and medical personnel and engineers rebuilding after catastrophes. Every human knows that if they are in danger, someone will come, and it does not matter if you are rich or poor, or what you look like, or where you are from, and if you call for help, humans will answer. The Admiral reappeared. We extend that same promise to the galaxy, and any species and any distress call, and we will respond. She stood, and the other humans stood with her. We are humanity, and we are here now, and the galaxy is not empty anymore, and you are not alone. The transmission ended with coordinates for human space and an open invitation for contact. The council chambers were silent for a long moment. Then the debates began. A military delegate argued that the humans were too dangerous to trust. They weaponize everything, and they turn civilian equipment into weapon systems, and what happens when they decide to turn that capability against council worlds? Seas Far Ahead responded sharply. They saved my people when no one else could, and they asked for nothing, and they left when we were safe. Trade representative raised concerns about economic impact. They appeared to have significant industrial capacity, and what if they disrupt established trade networks? A Talon scientist countered, they have technology we have never seen, and medical techniques that save lives. Our doctors could not, and perhaps we should be learning from them rather than fearing them. The debates continued for hours, and positions hardened and factions formed. Some species saw the humans as potential allies, and perhaps even saviors against threats like the Krell. Others saw them as a dangerous unknown that could destabilize the carefully balanced galactic order. Still, others simply wanted more information before making any decision. Harmonious accord finally called for order. We cannot decide this in one session, and I propose we establish a committee to study the human situation and to open formal diplomatic channels. The proposal passed with surprising unanimity. A small delegation was chosen to make contact with humanity, and they were given clear instructions to gather information and establish dialogue and assess intentions. The delegation was led by Skittering Through Shadows, who had argued that his experience at Virgil 7 made him uniquely qualified. The delegation departed Council Space 3 days later aboard a fast courier ship. Their destination was the coordinates provided in Admiral Chun's transmission. As they traveled, Skittering Through Shadows reviewed everything known about humans and tried to prepare for formal first contact. Watched the battle footage again and saw how the humans fought with creativity and determination and disregard for conventional tactics. He watched the aftermath footage and saw how they cared for the wounded and repaired the colony and asked for nothing. Tried to reconcile these two aspects of humanity and understand how one species could be both warrior and caretaker. The courier ship dropped out of faster than light travel. At the edge of human space, immediately, they were hailed by a human patrol ship. "This is the Terran patrol vessel. Vigilant Dawn, and please identify yourself and state your purpose." The delegation's first sight of Earth took their collective breath away. The planet hung in space like a jewel and swirled with white clouds and deep blue oceans and green-brown landmasses. But skittering through shadows, its sensors told a more complete story, and the gravity was nearly twice what the Council considered standard for habitable worlds, and the atmospheric pressure was higher than most species could comfortably tolerate. The oxygen content was so high it would be toxic to many Council species, and the weather patterns showed massive storm systems that would dwarf anything seen on gentler worlds. Ambassador Okonkwo noticed their reactions. "Yes, Earth is a difficult world and we call it home anyway, and it made us who we are." The delegation was brought to a space station orbiting Earth, and the station was called Unity, and it had been built specifically for receiving alien visitors who could not survive on Earth's surface. As they docked, skittering through shadows, observed the station's construction, and it showed remarkable engineering and multiple different environmental zones and careful attention to the needs of different species. They were greeted by a diverse group of humans who represented Earth's various nations and cultures and colonies. A tall man with pale skin and blue eyes stepped forward. "I am Secretary General Marcus Petrov, and on behalf of the United Earth Government, I welcome you." A shorter woman with brown skin and kind eyes added, "I am Dr. Amara. Azay and I lead our xenobiology team, and we have prepared environments suitable for each member of your delegation." The VRIX delegation was shown to quarters that had been carefully calibrated to their needs, and the gravity was adjusted, and the lighting matched their homeworld spectrum, and even the air had been filtered to remove compounds that might irritate their respiratory systems. Skittering through shadows was touched by the care and attention. "You prepared all this for us?" "But we only sent word of our arrival days ago." Dr. Asay smiled. "We have been preparing for this since Virgo 7, and we knew that first contact would come eventually. And we wanted to be ready, and we wanted you to be comfortable." The formal talks began the next day, and they took place in a circular chamber designed to give all participants equal status. Secretary General Petrov opened the discussions. "We understand you have questions and concerns about humanity, and we are here to answer honestly and openly." A Talon delegate named Current of Thought spoke first. "Your intervention at Virgo 7 was appreciated, but also concerning, and your military doctrine seems to prioritize aggression over preservation of life." Admiral Chun, who had traveled to Unity for the talks, responded, "Our doctrine prioritizes mission success and protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and yes, we are willing to take casualties to achieve those goals." She brought up tactical displays, but we are not reckless, and every human ship that engaged at Virgo 7 was crewed by volunteers who understood the risks and who chose to accept them. Captain Rodriguez added, "I have a family, and I want to go home to them, but I also know that the only reason I can trust space is because other humans would come if I called, and so I come when others call." A council military observer asked pointed questions about human weapons, technology and ship design and tactical capabilities. The humans answered everything openly, and even provided technical specifications that made the observer's eyes widen. Dr. Chun, from the Curiosity's Reward, explained, "We are not hiding our capabilities, and you should know what we can do. But you should also know that we choose when and how to use these capabilities." The discussions continued for 3 days and covered everything from trade to technology to cultural exchange. But the central question remained, could humanity be trusted? On the third day, skittering through shadows made a request. "I would like to visit Earth's surface, and I want to see the world that created humanity." There were immediate concerns about safety, and the gravity alone could injure him, and the atmospheric pressure could be dangerous. Dr. Asay spent 6 hours designing a support exoskeleton that would allow the Vrix to safely experience Earth the next day. Skittering through shadows descended to the surface in a specially designed shuttle. He emerged in a city called Nairobi, and the gravity pressed down on him, even with the exoskeleton's assistance, and he felt like he weighed twice his normal mass, but he could stand, and he could walk, and he could see. The city rose around him in towers of glass and steel, and greenery and gardens grew on every level, and water features provided humidity and cooling. Humans moved through the streets in incredible diversity, and he saw every skin tone imaginable and clothing styles that ranged from traditional to futuristic. Dr. Asay guided him through the city. This is one of Earth's oldest continuously inhabited areas, and people have lived here for hundreds of thousands of years. They visited a market where vendors sold everything from fresh food to handcrafted goods to advanced technology. A human child approached, skittering through shadows with wide eyes. "Are you an alien? A real alien from space?" The Vrix froze, unsure how to respond, and the child's mother started to apologize, but skittering through shadows found himself charmed. "Yes, I'm from very far away, and what is your name?" The child beamed. "I'm Zara, and I want to go to space someday, and will I meet more aliens like you?" Dr. Asay knelt beside the child. "If you study hard and work hard, then yes, you will, and the galaxy is big and full of friends we haven't met yet." The child ran off to tell her friends about meeting an alien, and skittering through shadows felt something shift in his understanding. These were not cold warriors or calculating strategists plotting conquest, and they were people who welcomed strangers and who taught their children to dream of the stars. Dr. Asay took him to a memorial next, and it was a simple structure of white stone inscribed with millions of names. "This is the memorial of sacrifice," she explained quietly. "And every name here is someone who died helping others, and rescue workers, and first responders, and soldiers who protected civilians, and ordinary people who gave their lives so strangers could live." Skittering through shadows, read some of the names and saw dates spanning centuries. "You honor those who help others?" Dr. Asay nodded. "It is our highest calling, and to risk yourself for someone else, and to choose to help even when it costs you everything." She gestured to the memorial. "This is why we answered your distress call, and this is who we aspire to be." That evening, skittering through shadows made his report to the council. Via faster-than-light communication, he stood before the holographic projection of the council chambers. "I have walked on Earth, and I have seen humanity's home world, and yes, it is a death world by our standards." He paused and chose his words carefully. "But it is also beautiful, and the humans have turned a world that tried to kill them into a garden, and they have taken the hardness that Earth taught them and used it to protect others." Seas far ahead spoke. "Do you believe they can be trusted?" Skittering through shadows considered everything he had seen. "I believe they are dangerous, yes, but I also believe they are sincere, and they truly will answer distress calls, and they truly will help," he added. "And I believe we need them, and the Krell have terrorized the outer colonies for too long, and pirates raid our shipping lanes, and disasters strike all worlds, and the Council's resources are stretched thin." Current of Thought asked, "Are you proposing an alliance?" The Vrix delegate straightened in his exoskeleton. "I am proposing we accept their offer and let them answer distress calls, and let them help, and then watch what they do and judge them by their actions." The debate in the council chambers was intense but shorter than before. The evidence was mounting, and humanity had saved Virgil 7 and had welcomed the council delegation and had answered questions openly, and most importantly, the galaxy had problems that conventional solutions were not solving. The vote was called, and after 3,000 years of careful deliberation and slow consensus building, the council made a decision in record time. The measure passed with 70% approval. Humanity would be granted provisional status as an associated power, and they would be permitted to respond to distress calls in council space, and they would be monitored and evaluated for full membership. Secretary General Petrov received the news with quiet satisfaction. "This is a beginning, and we will prove ourselves worthy of your trust." Admiral Chun immediately began coordinating with council military forces to establish protocols for joint operations. Captain Rodriguez and thousands of other civilian captains updated their navigation systems with council star charts and emergency frequencies. Dr. Chun started planning collaborative research projects with council scientists, and across human space the word went out. Humanity had been welcomed to the galactic community. The response was celebration mixed with determination, and humans knew they were being watched and judged. They intended to live up to their promise. 6 months later, the statistics told their own story. Human ships had responded to 847 distress calls across known space, and they had saved thousands of lives and prevented dozens of disasters. Some calls were simple mechanical failures, and some were medical emergencies, and some were hostile encounters like the Krull. Every single call received a response, and every time humans put themselves at risk for strangers, the council observers documented everything, and the reports flowed back to the chambers.